Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final event of Sanford Lab's Neutrino Day, A Matter Mystery. I'm Constance Walter. I'm the communications director here, and I have had so much fun this week, and I think my whole team has. I don't know about you, but between all the activities and science talks and virtual tours and Q's and A's and Native American games and all the different videos, I've got a few things to catch up on myself. So if you didn't get a chance to watch some of these events this week, please go to our website, neutrinoday.com, and watch them at your leisure. They're going to be there up for quite a while, so we hope you take some time to enjoy that. Now this afternoon, I'm really excited to welcome back our keynote speaker, Brian Malow. You know, we've done things a little bit differently this year. As you've witnessed over the last few days, Brian does a lot more than just stand-up comedy, which is how he's been billed throughout this event. He is an accomplished science communicator who has produced and appeared in science videos for Time Magazine's website and audio essays for Neil deGrasse Tyson's radio show. He gives workshops and presentations to train scientists to become better speakers. He has co-hosted Hacking the Planet and The Truth About Twisters on the Weather Channel. He's appeared on The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson on CBS and on Tech TV, Discovery, and A&E. And his Neil Armstrong routine was once heard aboard an orbiting space shuttle. Pretty cool. Now, Brian has also performed for the American Chemical Society, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, JPL, Scholastic Library Publishing, the National Association of Science Writers, the Koshland Museum of the National Academy of Sciences, Apple, Dell, and Microsoft, and now, of course, he's here with us at the Sanford Underground Research Facility. Brian also has worked in science communications at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh and has blogged for Scientific American and is currently a freelance speaker, performer, consultant, writer, producer, and whatnot. And finally, Brian also serves on the advisory board of the USA Science and Engineering Festival and as a contributing writer to the Journal of Irreproducible Results. That's quite a background. So please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome science comedian Brian Malow.
Thank you, Constance. And wow, since you read my entire biography, I'm afraid we're out of time. So good night, everybody. It's been great. I'm kidding. Slow down. That was our first joke. Not particularly funny, but bear with me. Let's ease into it. You may have noticed that, so I was supposed to be in South Dakota today. And yes, the past couple days, I was supposed to be there for Neutrino Day in person. But since I couldn't, and we're doing this virtually, there have been some pros of that. It's turned out Neutrino Day became an entire week of events, and it's been fantastic. And I've interviewed a lot of great scientists. And I decided for my background that I should be there anyway. So behind me is the Davis Cavern, which is, I guess this is how it looked a couple years ago, maybe. It's come along, and this is where the next great research facility is. This is underground in Lead, and this is where the Lux Zeppelin experiment is being built and will take place. So I'm coming to you sort of from underground. And I guess, Constance, I should have mentioned that of all the places you mentioned, I actually have also been to Snow Lab. This would be my second dark matter neutrino detector visit. And when I do eventually come visit you there, it'll be my second. So we'll be sure that happens. So thanks for being here, everybody. This is actually the first time I've performed in a little while, and the first time I've performed virtually like this. I've given talks and I've done a lot of online events, but this is the first time I've attempted stand-up comedy talking here in my room, here in Davis Cavern, just to a camera and unable to see any of you. So I do want to tell you that I'm not on the same platform that you're watching on. whatever platform you're watching on. You could be on YouTube or Vimeo or Facebook. But I do want to solicit some feedback from you. If at any time over the next hour you have any questions in particular, maybe comments, but questions, go ahead and send them in and they'll be forwarded to me and I might get to them. So just wanted to get that little housekeeping out there. And let's begin. Let's have a sip of water and let's start this thing. It's so very unusual to be performing this way. And it's not even nighttime. And, you know, comedians, we tend to perform at night. We tend to be night people. I've always been a night person. Even when I was a kid, I used to hate it when my parents made me go to bed early. I would fight about it and lose. But on my way to my room, I'd say something like, well, you can make me go to my room, but you can't make me go to sleep. Which probably would have been true, except my dad was an anesthesiologist. So then that's where I pause and wait for your laugh. But I'm going to be waiting a long time under these circumstances. You know, I forgot a very important announcement. I wanted to let you know that, first of all of these jokes are peer-reviewed. So no worries. These are all peer-reviewed jokes. And next month, we're seeking validation in mouse models. Just so you know, I'll update you when the time comes. And also, because we care about the environment, and even though the surf is a vast facility and consumes a lot of energy, and all of this can consume a lot of energy, we wanted to be really green. So this entire production is trying to be as green as possible. So for instance, everything, the lights, the microphone, the computers, the power, everything is being powered by recycled electrons. This is true. No electrons will be created or destroyed in the course of this production. So rest easy. Now, I also should make clear that although I'm a science comedian, I'm not a scientist. I'm a comedian, not a scientist, and I'm not a doctor, although I play one in the broken dreams of my parents. Thanks. Technically, that isn't a joke. That was me opening up to you. And presumably you are out there laughing. I'm going to go on that assumption that you're just staring at a device laughing. So I don't think I'm used to this yet, but that's okay. Now, although I'm not a scientist, science was my first love way before I thought about becoming a comedian. I thought about becoming a scientist, but apparently that's not enough, just thinking about it. You actually got to take the right classes, take the tests, do well. But I thought about becoming a scientist. I think when I try to back engineer my path, I think it started with science fiction. Like that was my gateway drug. I got my science cut with a little fiction, and that kind of led me into the science world. The kind of science fiction that I always loved, it's called hard SF, hard science fiction. And that just means, the hard part just means that the science is important and that science accuracy is important. So I grew up reading people like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Larry Niven. And they cared about getting the science right. And at some point I discovered that Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, they both wrote a lot of nonfiction. So Asimov in particular, he might be best known as a science fiction writer, but he wrote way more nonfiction. He published about 500 books in his lifetime. And it's often said of him, and I don't know if this is true, but I like passing it on anyway, that he wrote something that could fit in every category of the Dewey Decimal System in libraries. And I mean, it may not be precisely true, but it's pretty close. He wrote on pretty much every discipline of science, from all biology and genetics and chemistry and biochemistry and physics, astrophysics, earth sciences. He wrote about all the sciences, but he also wrote on American history, world history. He wrote books on, he wrote about mythology. He wrote about language. He wrote a couple memoirs and a couple books of limericks. He wrote on every subject. And I think he was a huge influence on me. And I have an Isaac Asimov quotation that I'd like to start us off with. And it's one you might have heard of. It's pretty popular. Asimov is pretty quotable. Asimov once said, "The most exciting phrase to hear in science, the one that heralds new discoveries, is not eureka, but that's funny." And I've always loved that. And I've always like resonated with it, because even as a comedian, that like it says something about how the scientific process begins, but also how the comedy process begins. It kind of starts with like, that's something's funny there. And what is it? And how can I get you to see it my way? If I could get you to see what I see there, maybe you would think it's funny too. And I would get a laugh or two. So, Asimov was a huge influence, and I was smitten with science fiction and science. And, you know, if you like science, and presumably you do, because you're here on Neutrino Day, and this is the kind of comedy show you're watching, if you like science, it's kind of hard to imagine why more people don't. It's hard to understand what's not to like about it. And it's just about curiosity. How can you peer out of those tiny holes in your skull with anything but curiosity about this world and this universe we find ourselves in, and all the weird little things and beautiful things about it? So I was always a curious kid. At least that's what the neighbors said. I think they meant well. I was always very curious. In fact, I remember once when I was about 10 years old, I asked my father, "Why is the sky blue?" And he said, "Go ask your mother." So I thought, cool. She knows. Oh, wow. So for the first time during Neutrino Day week, I just got a message that my internet connection is unstable. Let me know if anything. I don't want to be an hour into this and be told that I've been offline for the past hour. So if something happens, send me a chat, send me an email. I'll get that too, because my phone is nearby. Maybe I'll see the notification pop up. So I'll prop this up and make it more visible. But I'm going to plow through and expect that we're not going to lose the connection. So I asked my father, "Why is the sky blue?" He said, "Go ask your mother." So I kind of optimistically thought, well, she knows. Excellent. And I went off in search of my mom. And I really felt like I was experiencing the scientific method, like I was following in the footsteps of Newton and Galileo. And I found my mom, and I was so excited. I go, "Mom, why is the sky blue?" And I'll never forget her answer: "Because I said so." At first, I was in awe of my mom. Later, I learned not to trust her in matters of science. Maybe she's not the authority. I noticed a long time ago, whenever my mom would lose weight, my dad would gain weight. And when my dad lost weight, my mom gained weight. It was like the conservation of mass within our family. And I had a theory that you never actually lose weight. You just give it to somebody else. Fat can be neither created nor destroyed. It's one of the basic laws of the universe. One time, my dad's love handles got so big, they just broke off. My theory didn't predict that. My parents were pretty funny. I suppose I got my sense of humor from them or because of them, in reaction to them. I'm not sure exactly, but they were kind of funny. My mom used to always tell me to stand up straight. I was like that, stand up straight. You ever get that from your mom? That really is kind of a classic mom thing, to say stand up straight. I think moms have been telling their kids that for longer than we realize, perhaps even to pre-human days. What if that were the driving force behind the evolutionary trend to walk erect? Mothers nagging their children up the evolutionary ladder. Stand up straight. Don't drag your knuckles when you walk. What are you, born in a tree? Do you want the other families to think we're not evolving? No, Mom. This is more surreal than I thought it was going to be. And I thought it was going to be. So I have been, this has been obviously a very weird time. And my diet has been very strange throughout it. I've talked to several people who it seems like there were certain times, like at the beginning of quarantining and stuff, I started for some reason, I was eating a lot of string cheese and dry roasted peanuts. Those were like my staples. And I make a lot of smoothies. But I've like most of us, I've tried a few diets and done a little experimenting. And there's a diet I wanted to say something about, which is, it's called the Paleo Diet, which I suppose a lot of you have heard of it. The Paleo Diet. Paleo is short for Paleolithic. And the idea, whether it's flawed or not, the idea is that there's so much stuff in our food environment today that is so far removed from nature and from what we evolved eating. Ice cream and pizza, these are pretty unlike foods that our ancient ancestors would have been exposed to. So the concept is that the healthiest diet for us should be what our bodies are adapted to eat, what our Paleolithic ancestors ate. I don't know if that means wild gazelle or something, saber-toothed tiger, if you can get one. But just that basic idea. And a few years back, my ex and I, we decided that we were going to try it, but we just wanted to ease our way into it. So we started by eating the oldest food in the refrigerator. And we did lose weight. I don't know if I'm going to recommend that diet. That's not the best method, but I do eat reasonably healthy. I like a lot of fruit. I know there's certain vegetables I should eat more of, and I know carrots are a big one. I love carrots when they're steamed and buttered and they're delicious. I don't even know if you, maybe it's just the steam and the butter that I like. I don't know. The carrot is really just a delivery system for the butter, maybe. But I know they're good for me. And it's just that raw carrots, so many people, I can't imagine. In fact, raw, they're so hard and pointy. I can't even wrap my mind around that someone thousands of years ago pulled a carrot out of the ground and thought it was food. I would sooner stab someone with a carrot than think that this was actually edible. But I know that they're good for me and that I should eat more of them. But I realized one day I had a little bit of an epiphany. I thought, I could eat carrots all day, or I could eat one rabbit. And wouldn't that achieve the same effect? It's the food chain brought to you. So, so bizarre, not hearing anything. Are some of you out there? I do have the good folks at the Sanford lab have, I can see a couple people on my feed, but they're actually far away. They're in the last, say, if you were at a comedy club, I would be asking you to move up to the front row or something. Like, why are you as far from the camera as you can possibly be? And I can't see your faces all the way back there. And I'm sorry if this is meaningless to most viewers, but come a little closer. And whoever's on the far end is scooting out of the shot now. Yeah, get back in the shot. Thank you. My internet connection is unstable. This is bad news. I'm not on Wi-Fi. I'm hardwired in. So am I coming in good? I hope so. I'll just take that as a yes. So, wow, these have been such weird times. And for me, I usually travel a lot. And if you do travel a lot, I've spent a lot of time at airports the past couple of years. And if you spend any time in airports, now the electrical outlets have become like the watering holes around which we gather with all our devices, seeking that precious, precious resource, electricity, right? I mean, you could be wandering the gleaming halls of an airport like it's the dry plains of the Serengeti. And then if you do spot one, if you see one, usually, it's already got a bunch of travelers surrounding it and there's no way you're going to break in there. And sometimes people have more than one thing plugged in and that seems unfair. Sometimes I think maybe if I toss out some thumb drives, it could distract them and then I could go plug myself in. But so much time spent in airports and thankfully, we have our technology to keep us connected. I have to say, I was a late adopter of the cell phone in particular. I think it's because of a couple reasons. One is I didn't think that I needed to be reached at all times. I realize now how wrong I was. That was very naive of me. Of course, I need to be connected at all times. It's come so far from that mindset that I barely move through the house without my phone. Like, I don't think I'd be comfortable doing this at all if my phone weren't within sight. It's become pretty pathetic. But the thing that is still really annoying about them is having to overhear so many conversations. One side of a conversation even. I was at an airport and there was a guy like 2 gates over talking so loud, all I could think is he almost doesn't need a telephone. Does he not understand the concept? We're going to broadcast the signal for you. You don't have to shout it from the mountaintop. Like his last phone was a Dixie cup and string. There have been advances. In fact, I thought, we're in the 21st century. He could be talking to someone anywhere in the world. He could be talking to someone on another continent. And all I could picture is someone thousands of miles away holding the phone away from their ear. It's like, yeah, dude, you're coming in just fine. So, so this is a great job, though. I love my job. I love being a comedian. It's not the only job I've ever had. In fact, I used to be an astronomer, but I got stuck on the day shift, which sucks. You don't discover anything good. Sometimes when I tell that joke, I just stop there. But sometimes with science savvy audiences, I feel like if I don't say this, people are thinking it, that, of course, if you're a solar astronomer and you study the sun, you might work on the day shift. And if you're a radio astronomer, you might work on the day shift. And if you work at SURF, you might be a mile underground studying the stars, in a sense, on the day shift even. So it turns out anyway, today, almost all professional astronomers work on the day shift because they can operate a telescope on the other side of the world, gather the data at night, look at it in the daytime. So there still are astronomers doing that romantic image of peering through a telescope, but a lot of them are amateur astronomers. So anyway, that's one way to ruin a joke, to tell it and then dissect it for even longer than you told the joke. What else can I tell you about myself? I went to a magnet school for bipolar students. That's true. I love movies. I saw a movie with my friend Chuck a few months ago, and I don't like seeing movies with Chuck because he always has to sit in the front row because he thinks he gets to see the movie before anybody else. And you can't argue with him because he always has the same last word. The speed of light is finite, Brian. And that's true. The speed of light is finite, but it's very fast. Do you know how fast? 186,000 miles per second. So if you had a theater, this is what I told Chuck, if you had a theater 186,000 miles long, you would only see the movie 1 second before the guy in the last row. And he said, yeah, but you'd hear it a week and a half before. And you probably wouldn't get your popcorn for years. I remember I like IMAX films. I remember one of the best ones I saw was called Everest. It wasn't that narrative movie, but it was actually like a 40-minute IMAX film. There was a documentary about this team of climbers that made it to the top of Mount Everest with a film crew. That doesn't make it any easier. And I told my mom about the movie. And here's the only thing she said. She goes, oh, I could never do that. It's so cold up there. Like, that's the one reason she hasn't climbed Mount Everest. Like, she was about to ever at any point in her life, never mind the 5-mile ascent up rock and ice, slippers on her feet, cigarette dangling from her lips. No, you didn't tell me it was chilly at the time. You know what? So in my head, I just laughed because when I said slippers on her feet, this is the first show. That's an old joke of mine. I've told it a million times. But this is the first time that I've told it wherein, hold on. This is the first time I told it where I'm wearing slippers and shorts. I blew the illusion, but I haven't worn, it's a good thing I had shorts on, huh? I didn't have to. I don't have to have anything under here. We're in such a weird world. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it's really hot here in the summer. So Even in April and May, it's really hot. So I haven't worn long pants in as long as I can remember. I don't even remember the last time because I have nothing to do out there in the so-called real world. And shorts will do for every gig. Dress shirt and shorts. It's the new business attire. All right. So you know what I thought is I would tell you some jokes. And then I want to sort of tell you a little story that weaves in a lot of science and some humor. There should still be some humor there. And then we'll come back to more jokes too. But I wanted to tell you a little story that happened right here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's probably 2 years ago now in the spring. Right here at my house. I was sitting on my porch. And it was a beautiful spring day. And it was a beautiful spring day, but I had a lot of kind of heavy thoughts on my mind. Quite a lot of stuff. My marriage hadn't worked out quite the way I planned. And so much weird divisiveness and craziness going on. In fact, maybe I have the timing wrong. Maybe it was 3 years ago and there had been an election that was very upsetting. So I had a lot of heavy thoughts on my mind while I was enjoying the light. It was a combination of heavy and light. And I was thinking a lot about impermanence. And in fact, I would even say this story that I'm telling you is a work in progress. And that's not weird. Pretty much everything is. The earth, life on earth is a work in progress. The universe is a work in progress. I'm a work in progress. So if I fail to be perfect, it's okay. We're all works in progress. So I had all these thoughts on my mind and I was sitting there, but it was such a beautiful day. And I live really close to downtown, but it's not as urban as San Francisco, where I moved from. So sitting here, Raleigh is called the City of Oaks, and there's a lot of green, even this close to the center of downtown. I'm sitting on my porch, and the sun is shining, and grass is growing, and trees, and birds. I got great birds here. We have a lot of cardinals and sometimes blue jays. I always love it. I think all birds are cool, but I love when they get out away from those greens and browns, those most common nature colors. When you have red cardinal and blue jays, they're just so cool looking. And then I saw a robin. I saw a robin pull a worm out of the ground, right out of the earth in my yard, and then fly away with it. And I remember I actually thought, that is no longer an earthworm. It's airborne. It's like a sky worm. So it was just, in a way, it was just a really good day. For me, not so much for the worm, maybe not as good a day for the worm, but for me, it was a really good day. And I guess that is even hits the theme of what I'm talking about right now, which is perspective. To me, it was a great day. To the worm, not so much. But I love birds. I'm so fascinated by flight. In fact, one of the other things that was on my mind is that I'd been to a party, and my friend Patrick, who's an astrophysicist, he and I had a fun argument, a geeky argument. And if you're not familiar with geeky arguments, they're the best. And I'm a self-professed geek, so don't take that wrong. And I love geeky arguments. And typically, the less important the topic, the more vehement the argument. And so we're at a party, and Patrick asked me if I could have any superpower, what would it be? So usually I solicit some answers from the audience. Just take a moment and think about that. You don't have to send anything in. What superpower would you be? I've heard a lot of interesting answers. One I didn't expect, teleportation, someone said, and I think that's fascinating. I know a scientist who's been working on teleportation for years, but he hasn't gotten anywhere. Anyway, just ignore that. Walk it off. Walk it off. Sometimes groaning is acceptable. for a joke. I've heard time travel. I never really thought about that as a superpower. That's pretty cool. But at the time, I think Patrick and I, in all the times I've asked audiences what superpower they'd want, the two most common ones are the two that Patrick and I discussed. So I chose flight, which is the correct answer. And Patrick said, do you know what he chose? Invisibility, which is absolutely super cool. I read when I was growing up, I read The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. And of course I love invisibility. But as far as a superpower that I would want, I don't find that to be a very compelling choice because I don't know, what did he want to do with that? Flight, the age-old dream of flight, I just think that that's obviously the correct answer, unless you can have time travel or teleportation or something. But teleportation is almost just an extension of flight, almost, but except without the experience of flying. So Patrick, we started arguing about it, and Patrick, I think he thought he could be maybe some sort of super spy or super thief, but I don't think he thought that through because, okay, you're invisible, but the stuff you're stealing isn't invisible. So it's like, well, what's that bag of money going down the sidewalk? And I hope that you pictured that cartoon bag with the money sign on it right there. Is that what you pictured right there? What's that bag of money? Also, if you're invisible, you got to worry about people bumping into you. You can't get a taxi. You can't get a waiter, And not only that, it's worse than that. If you're invisible, you're also blind. Do you know what I mean? If you're invisible, your retina is invisible. Your retina is where the light comes in. It's like the little screen in your eye. And if light just passes right through it instead of getting absorbed by cells in the retina, then you're also blind. So people are bumping into you, stepping on your toes, and you're bumping into things. So I don't know what kind of superpower you think that is, whereas flight, the dream of flight is so compelling that we went from the Wright brothers to landing on the moon in one human lifespan. That's flight. And I think Patrick knew that he was losing. Because also just to soar like that, how amazing. And we all have dreams about flying. I think everyone's had a dream about flying. I don't know if we've all had dreams about being invisible. But I think he knew he was losing because then he said, he seemed very frustrated. And he goes, well, what if you could only fly like this high off the ground? Well, then I probably wouldn't choose it. What if you were only translucent? And I think that's how I won the argument. I'm going to take a minute to let you continue clapping and applauding and laughing. So flight. I really like thinking about flight like from an evolutionary perspective. The advent of flight, what an amazing development. But let's go back first. Today, the state of science today, although it's a work in progress, we believe that it's most likely that life evolved in the oceans, right? And maybe even near these hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. So life evolved in the ocean, and there was a lot of ocean life before land was conquered, before something crawled out of the ocean onto dry land. And I mean, you cannot overestimate what an amazing evolutionary step that is, from the warm, safe, wet womb of the ocean to crawl out onto this dry land. No wonder we have to drink 8 glasses of water a day. You didn't have to when you lived in the ocean, but it's dry here and it's bright and there's fire. That's something that didn't even exist down there. It's just a whole new world. But life conquered the land. Plants, insects, animals. Interestingly, some, and then just, like proliferated and differentiated in all these different species. But do you know that somewhere down the line, some life that had crawled onto land went back to the ocean? And we know this, we can study these. So some bear-like creature, something that I think was an ancestor to bears, if I remember correctly, went back to the ocean and evolved into cetaceans, whales, and dolphins. So those mammals, we've been able to trace them probably through a combination of like their anatomy and genetics. So we know that that was their path. And so how amazing that I just love that. Like they were like, you know what? You can have this. We're going back. Nope, we're going home. This is yours. This is ridiculous. Fire. They didn't need sunglasses down there. So we conquered land. And then flight, the advent of flight, like how amazing to think of the first thing that flew. I don't know, probably an insect, but you know what? Flight isn't limited to insects. We have birds, obviously, but some mammals, bats are mammals that fly. And, you know, in a way, some plants, if they don't exactly fly, they certainly make use of it. Some plants like those helicopter seeds or dandelion seeds make use of being able to, in fact, spiders, here's something, 8 legs, no wings. Spiders have even come up with a way by releasing a long thread. They can catch a breeze and they can travel vast distances. They're known to have traveled across a series of Hawaiian islands, hopping from one to the next by like this sort of parasailing technique. So it's unbelievable how many things have learned to fly, and flight, because of genetics, it's known that flight has evolved independently in the insect kingdom more than once. By tracing the genes, it's known that some types of flies were flightless, then gained flight, then became flightless again and gained flight again. Like they've gone back and forth. And this is readable in their genetic code. So I think that's fascinating. But just the idea, like when the first thing flew, like how incredible must that have been? It's like, I just can imagine standing off to the side going, hey, wait, who said you could do that? Where did you get this idea even? Evolution is very creative. To fly is to defy gravity. Flying in the face of gravity, which brings us to our other big theme. You know, the name of the show is Just Add Gravity. Now that's where we're headed. That's like a little sidebar. I'm a comedian that has footnotes, apparently. Okay, so gravity. I've thought about gravity for a long time. In fact, one time I went back to my parents' house and I found some little things, some stuff I wrote in 2nd grade. And the gravity one is my favorite one. But let me just give you a couple sidebar. Let me give you these two unrelated ones that I also like. One was about Abraham Lincoln. So it's big, imagine big lined paper and, you know, not the best handwriting, circa 2nd grade. Abraham Lincoln was born February 12th, 1809. He was born in the state of Kentucky. He was born in a log cabin. Most of his neighbors lived in cabins too. Just think it's hard to argue with. It's probably true, right? Another great one was, so this one is about T-Rex, and I wrote out Tyrannosaurus. It's misspelled, but you know what? It's it's not bad, considering I must not have looked it up. I took a stab at it, but this one says, I wish I was a Tyrannosaurus Rex because it is a dinosaur. It is almost the biggest one, but sometimes I wish I was not. Brian Malow, 2nd grade. But my favorite, by far, and in fact, it's probably one of my favorite things that I ever wrote. It's like I wrote like in 2nd grade, and then it was just downhill, gravitationally downhill after that. I think I might be overselling it. Maybe I'm saying too much before I say it, but I just think it's one of the most surreal things I ever wrote. And what I really would like to know is, what was the assignment? Why did 2nd grade Brian write this? I can't imagine what the assignment was that would have me write, if the Earth lost its gravity and you went to school, the school would not be there. And on the way home, you would not be there. I love that. If I could write that well, There would probably be more than 3 people on screen watching me at surf right now. But I just think that is the trippiest thing. And it gets us into the subject of gravity. Gravity. We start to deal with gravity very soon after we're born. Our four-legged, on the, you know, one of the first major, well, maybe not the first, but a big task in our first year or so is to learn to navigate, to negotiate a gravitational field, to stand up on these 2 spindly little legs. Our four-legged friends have a huge advantage when it comes to that. And it's funny how different they start out in life compared to us. Some things, like say in Africa, some gazelle or something like that. Some of those things, when they're born, they're like, they got to get up on their feet almost immediately. And in some cases, like, okay, I know you're a little wobbly, you're steady, because, all right, well, you good, because we got to go. We have predators. There's a lion that's got your birth notice, apparently. And we got to, so as soon as you're ready, we've got to run. So out the womb, leave the placenta there, we're going. Whereas humans, could there be a bigger contrast? For most of us, we go to a special building filled with doctors and lawyers. Sure, there's lawyers, doctors and nurses and all sorts of machines, all to keep humans alive. And the birth process, you know, it's not typically your mom unassisted. Oh no, there's doctors and nurses in special gowns and with all this machinery just to get you born. And then when you're born, you're not on your own. You're not on your own for 10 or 20 years, definitely not 10. In most cases, at best, you're not on your own for a decade and a half or 2. It is so different. We start off crawling too. That's almost like reenacting our crawl out of the ocean. And then eventually here we are. Anyway, that's how I see it. And that's what this is about, perspective. So this is how I see it. And I got something I want to share with you. I could tell you that in addition to performing, I give a lot of science communication talks to scientists, and I have a piece of, it's really some of my favorite science communication advice, and it comes from an anecdote from Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman, the late, great American physicist, Nobel Prize winner. Many people consider him to be one of the great physicists of the 20th century. And Feynman, there's this great anecdote that he tells. He says that his father used to read to him from the encyclopedia. He said he would sit him on his lap. I think he was a child at the time. And he would read to him an article about dinosaurs, for instance. And he said he would get to a part that said, this dinosaur attained a length of so many feet. And he would close the book and he'd say, you know what that means? That means if this dinosaur was in our front yard and you were in your 2nd-story bedroom window, you could be looking him right in the eyes. So he took those bare facts and he translated them into what they really mean. And he said, I have the same disease. He said, whenever I read something, I'm compelled to translate it into what it really means. And that hit me like an analogy I haven't come up with yet. I resonated with that because, again, as a comedian, it's very similar. Like I see something and I want to, and I might think it's funny. Here's another example, also from an airport. An airport where humans fly on machines we built because flight is the most compelling and important fantasy that we've made real. Here's an example of like how Asimov said that starting with a little like, that's funny, and how do you proceed from there? And Feynman and say, well, what does this really mean? Well, that works for a science communication, but it also works for a comedian. I'll tell you an observation I had at airports. is I don't smoke, but I think some smoking restrictions could be a little extreme, maybe even comical. And my favorite example is at airports. You know those airports where you can't smoke anywhere except one of those special glassed-in rooms? I love those. It's like a terrarium in which you can view the smokers in a recreation of their natural habitat. If you haven't seen one of these, well, eventually you'll go to an airport. Maybe you'll see one. They're really cool. They'll have a lounging area, a pacing area, because the smokers need their exercise. If you come at the right time, you might see a couple out basking on rocks, fighting amongst themselves, grooming each other. You know, parents are bringing their kids up to read the little plaque describing the species. Oh, Homo emphysemus, an endangered species. The only thing they don't have is one of those coin-operated machines so you can buy cigarettes to toss out to the smokers. Check it out. He's smoking the one I threw. That is so cute. Okay, so that was a sidebar too. So what it really means. So I love using that Feynman anecdote as a launch pad to talk about some science communication stuff. And a couple examples I like using are, for instance, the International Space Station. The International Space Station, the ISS, orbits the Earth at like 17,500 miles an hour, which it does sound fast, but that's a number that's pretty outside our daily experience. Well, what if I told you that that's almost 5 miles per second? And what that means is, if you were in space and the ISS went by, in 1 second, it would be 5 miles away. It's the size of a football field. That's incredible. And 17,500 miles an hour doesn't quite get that across. Another example, Pangaea, a couple 100 million years ago, instead of this sad state of affairs with 7 separate continents dividing us, there was one giant landmass called Pangaea. Well, you know what that means? International travel was very easy. You want to go to Australia? It's right over here. Amsterdam, right there. So, yeah. We are so divided. I can't get around that topic either. We're so divided, and politically and maybe socially, but science thrives on international cooperation, and science really wants to cross all those borders. But we do have this problem socially and politically, I think more politically than anything else, that is so divisive. And we need to come together, as John Lennon said, right now. Which, of course, brings me back to gravity, because gravity has been bringing things together for billions of years. It's the grand unifier. It's like a cosmic aphrodisiac. It's the original matchmaker. Now I know, you might see it differently. You might say, hey, gravity brings me down. But the way I see it, gravity brings us together. It grounds us. Where would we be without gravity? Actually, we wouldn't be at all, because without gravity, we wouldn't have stars or starlight. We wouldn't have the sun or sunlight, right? Without gravity. So I think I think by now, and especially if you saw some of our interviews and programs all this week in Neutrino Day, that I think a lot of people know this and have heard this. I sure hope so, that after the Big Bang, and things started to cool and expand, there were really just a few elements in the entire universe, and it was almost all hydrogen. There was some helium and maybe a little lithium, but really it was basically a universe cooling and expanding and filled with just hydrogen. Well, there's not a lot you can do with that. It would have been a really boring universe, but just add gravity and the results are amazing. It's kind of like live sea monkeys, or those little dinosaurs, the spongy little dinosaurs that you drop in water and they expand. It's kind of like that. Just add gravity to the early universe and the results are astounding, because you have all this hydrogen dispersed through the universe. Well, because of gravity, it starts getting collected all over the place into big balls called stars, and stars are the factories that make all the other elements. So the other elements that are the building blocks of everything, the camera, the buttons on my shirt, my computer. I can only think of 3 things right now, but they're all made of those same elements, you know? Oranges, Freddie Mercury, all of these things are just made out of the same elements. And that were made in stars. And I first encountered this idea when I was pretty young, and it was from Carl Sagan and the original Cosmos. And I just thought it was amazing and mind-blowing. And I got so excited, I just wanted to tell everybody. I wanted to go door to door. Have you heard the Gospel of Carl? Yeah, we are star stuff. These atoms were forged in stars. We're celestial beings. Pass it on. Hope I didn't wake you, but now you're woke. But wait, there's more. Almost as an afterthought, in the process of making all those elements, stars also do this. In the process of making all those elements, in the process of fusing hydrogen into helium, which is really, if you think about it, it's the main activity probably happening in the entire universe. It's the main industry, is the manufacture of helium from hydrogen in star factories all over the universe. But in that process of making helium from hydrogen, there's this little excess energy that gravity has wrung out of hydrogen atoms. And that little bit of energy is radiating in every direction. But 93 million miles away, and that little place that's the Earth, the light that's falling on the Earth, that light right there becomes the source of energy to move not only physical things like air and water and land, but it powers almost all life on Earth. Because green plants evolved that have the ability to capture sunlight and convert it and store it as a chemical energy. And then that becomes the foundation of the food chain, right? Because life feeds on life. So a cow eats the grass, a man eats the cow, a mosquito eats a little bit of the man, a frog eats the mosquito, a snake eats the frog, a bird eats the snake, a woman eats the bird. And that energy is just passed on and on. It's like a game of telephone. And that energy, it's never destroyed. It's only transformed. And it's passed on and on. So if you eat an apple or a cheeseburger, you access that energy and then you use it to power your brain and your heart and to move your arms and legs. Some of it just radiates off you as heat. If you walk, some of it radiates away as vibrations in the floor. If you use some of that energy to flap your vocal cords, you can create this wave in the air. And that wave is energy, and it's the same energy. Your voice is sunshine, and so is mine. It sounds like poetry, but it's true. Me and you and you and you, we are made of star stuff. And isn't that enough? You know, some people think science is boring. Not you, obviously. Not you, attendees of Neutrino Day. You understand that science isn't boring. Some people think science is boring, or something like astrophysics. It seems so esoteric and disconnected from our life on Earth. But by studying the stars, we learned our own origin story, and it's a blockbuster. You know, science, like comedy, is always finding patterns and connections. So for instance, through biology, we learned that all life on Earth is related. And through physics, we've learned that life is just made out of the exact same stuff that the rest of the universe is made of. So we're not separate from the universe at all. We're a part of the universe that has become conscious. In fact, that's another thing Carl Sagan said. To Carl Sagan, that meant we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. Isn't that beautiful? I hear that and I think, wow, the human race is like a global multi-camera production with 7 billion different cameras documenting the human condition from 7 billion different angles. And the more, the merrier. So So, so let's take a sip of water. I lost my train of thought there. I was going pretty good there for a while, though. Not bad for just talking to a camera for already an hour. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, I totally, the more I think about it, the more I'm confused. Give me one sec. Oh yeah, we're gonna come back to that. Okay, so that's right. So before I have another sidebar. That's what threw me. There wasn't a good connection here because I want to insert a sidebar here. Before we move forward, I moved to Raleigh some years ago to work at a science museum, and it was an awesome experience. I worked in science communications, and I spent about 4 years with them. And so it was like a family and a lot of friends, and there are a lot of scientists, and I learned so many things. And there's two interesting things I want to share with you. The first one is, and this is becoming relevant because I'm getting a little warm in here, but here's something I learned. Our sweat is odorless. Now, you might not know that or think that because it doesn't seem like our sweat is odorless. But the thing is, our sweat is odorless. But, you know, our bodies are covered in bacteria, and many different species of bacteria, and different species and populations on different parts of our body, because they're all like different ecosystems. So the bacteria on the back of your hand is not necessarily the same as the bacteria under your arm. So the bacteria under your arm, though, you sweat, it's odorless, but the bacteria in your armpit eats that sweat. It consumes that sweat. And then what it excretes, that's the odor that you think is your odor if you're sweaty and smelly. So how fascinating. That's not really your odor. It's generated by bacteria that happen to be living on you. And it's especially interesting to me because smell has a big role in mate choice. Right? So, that somebody doesn't smell right to you, or they do smell right to you. Like my ex, she used to love the way I smelled. And then I started wondering, well, if I got rid of my bacteria, it's not my smell, it's my bacteria. So if I got rid of my bacteria, would she stay with me or go with them? And I guess she made that decision. I kid. I don't think that's what it was about. But so our sweat is odorless. And then think about that. Bacteria play a role in our mate choice, then that means they play a role in like the direction of human evolution. So bacteria can affect human evolution, to some extent. That's how interconnected we are. We're interconnected in so many ways that we never think about, and plenty of ways that we're probably not even aware of yet. Okay, now my favorite thing that I learned at the museum is that birds are dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. They're not descended from dinosaurs or related to dinosaurs, which is, I think that's the way I learned it when I was a kid. But today, birds are taxonomically categorized as dinosaurs. They are avian theropod dinosaurs. So two big classes of dinosaurs are those giant sauropods, like a brontosaurus, and then there's theropods like T-Rex and Velociraptor. I can only name dinosaurs that were in Jurassic Park. I'm kind of a bad science comedian. So those are non-avian theropods, and birds are avian theropods. They're avian theropod dinosaurs. So it's really not accurate to say dinosaurs are extinct in the same way that Pluto is no longer a planet. Sorry, we don't have to get into that one right now. I don't want to fight you, but it's not really accurate to say that dinosaurs are extinct, because the truth is there were birds existing before the extinction event 65 million years ago. And after that extinction event, it killed all the other dinosaurs and a lot of the birds. But some birds are the only group of dinosaurs that survived. And today, they're not extinct. There are 10,000 living species of dinosaur. They're on every continent, and their diversity is beautiful. There's a hummingbird that weighs less than a penny. and a 300-pound ostrich that stands 9 feet tall. Not quite tall enough to peer into your second-story bedroom window, but I'm okay with that. There are peacocks and penguins and murmurations of starlings, carrion eaters and birds of prey. The bald eagle, symbol of our nation, is a dinosaur. So is Donald Duck and Tweety Bird and the Roadrunner. Corvids, like crows, are clever tool-using dinosaurs. Parrots are talking dinosaurs. Blackbird singing in the dead of night, that's a song about a dinosaur. And so is Freebird. And I know why the caged dinosaur sings. Here's how not extinct dinosaurs are. Most mornings when I wake up, the first thing I hear is the cries of dinosaurs outside my dwelling. I get up, I have dinosaur eggs for breakfast. I go out to my car, and a dinosaur has desecrated my car. From the looks of it, many dinosaurs, a whole gaggle of a parliament, a murder of dinosaurs has pooped all over my car. Dinosaurs pooping on buildings is such a modern problem that we have an entire industry of countermeasures. You know those spiky things they put on buildings? You know what they're called? Bird spikes, or pigeon spikes if you have to single out one group. On Thanksgiving, almost every non-vegetarian in America eats the same dinosaur for dinner, right? Colonel Sanders built an empire on his recipe for fried dinosaur parts sold by the bucket. So we know what dinosaur tastes like. It tastes like chicken or turkey or duck. And if somebody has a small appetite, what do we say? Oh, she eats like a bird. How did the bird become the standard, for eating light? Photosynthesis, that's eating light. Yes, let's all take a moment and ponder what a long way that was to go for that pun. So I will one more time say, if you have any questions that you want to send in, I'm going to talk for a little while longer, and then I'm going to invite Constance to join me, and we're going to chat together a little bit. But if you have any questions, get them sent in. And so photosynthesis, it's been called the most important chemical reaction on Earth. And of course, because it's at the core of the food chain and so much more. And how fascinating. What an amazing thing. And I love these mind-blowing ideas in science. So for instance, the fact that these atoms were forged in stars, that's a hard one to beat. But there's another one that's fascinating about trees. So we know that these green plants, they inhale carbon dioxide and they exhale oxygen. And so the oxygen is just a waste to them. Here's another perspective thing. One person's garbage is another person's air supply. And those are two band names, as a matter of fact, garbage and air supply. It's like what's garbage to you is what we need, and what's garbage to us, we exhale the CO2, and that's their air supply. So you might think, like if you picture a giant redwood, you might think, what is that made of? It started as a seed and it grew to this huge thing. And what did it build itself out of? And it would be pretty natural to assume that it was mostly built out of stuff that it pulled out of the ground through its roots. And it's true, it does get water and minerals, but most of the tree is actually made from carbon that it pulls out of the air when it's breathing and when it's conducting photosynthesis. It's building itself out of thin air. So you look at a vast redwood and that thing made itself out of air. I mean, that's incredible. And on air, here's another perspective thing. I know that we have an issue with some people denying the reality of climate change. And I think that if you just understood how very thin the atmosphere is, from our perspective, standing here on the surface of the Earth, it might seem like the planet is huge and the atmosphere is vast. But when you step back and you look at it from space, the Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter, and the atmosphere, 8,000 miles, and the atmosphere is 100 miles at most. And actually, most of it is in the first 40 or 50 miles. It gets very thin after that. So the atmosphere is like 40 or 50 miles compared to an 8,000 mile diameter. It's this little onion skin thin layer. And by the way, we also have gravity to thank once again, because the only reason this fortunate mix of gases is clinging to the earth is because of gravity. Isn't that incredible? Like how lucky, and that becomes our whole, the ability for us to have an ecosystem. So, again, perspective. It may seem big, but when you look at it in a bigger picture, it isn't. And so I want to revisit. Remember when I was sitting on my porch on that spring day a couple years ago? Now, when I think about that, it's enhanced by all this other stuff I know about science. I was sitting on my porch, which is made of wood that was made by a tree for a tree. Sorry, it wasn't really made for us, but we've taken it. Made by trees, from carbon pulled out of thin air. That wooden porch that's been built for me. I'm sitting there and the grass is growing and the trees and photosynthesis is happening and the songs of dinosaurs fill the air. And when I watch that robin pull that worm, that little packet of sunshine out, and then it flew away. Maybe it was going to go drop it in the mouths of its baby dinosaurs back at the nest. And all of this, like just, when people wonder what good science is for, it enhances every part of your life experience. And just to know these things, Feynman actually said something similar to this too, that like having additional knowledge it only enhances your experience. Like to know, it's even more beautiful to think of things in this way. So I'm gonna wrap up with a few jokes and then bring Constance on. Okay, I'm going to do two things for you. One, because I haven't told any neutrino jokes specifically, but I have one. Oh, I see there's a question. Okay. Is that why you were raising your hand there, Aaron? Well, let me just see what this says. First of all, one is, what is your favorite type of bird? That's a great question. I don't know. Let me think about that a second. I mean, I've never owned, when I was a kid, we had some parakeets, but what's funny though? I have a paleontologist friend from the museum, Dr. Lindsay Zano. And when you ask her what her favorite dinosaur is, it's a living one. It's called a secretary bird. Go look it up. It is a vicious looking thing. First of all, it has really amazing, it's tall, kind of tall with long legs, and it has these great head feathers, and then it can kill snakes. It stomps them with its claw. It's got these claws that it's a dinosaur. So I can tell you her favorite dinosaur is a living bird. I'll have to think about that. I don't really have them ranked. I don't know what my favorite bird is. I think they're all pretty cool. Some are smart, some talk. I'll have to think about that. Here's one. My superpower would be getting people to use adverbs correctly. Oh yeah, I think that's a great superpower, but I think it's useless against humans. It's never going to happen. Not a ton of questions about the feedback. At what point in your life did you decide to try comedy? I'm thinking of trying it soon. Anytime. Today's my first time. No, you know what? I grew up loving stand-up comedy, and I had albums from George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Steve Martin, Monty Python albums. The original cast of Saturday Night Live had an album that we had in our house. I loved comedy, but I was more interested in music, and I wrote songs with a friend. So I wrote lyrics to his music mostly. And that's Chuck, by the way. I used him in my joke about seeing a movie in the speed of light. So it was I was interested in it, but I was too shy. I wasn't a performer. I didn't do theater or anything. And so I went to college at the I grew up in Houston, went to Austin, University of Texas. I was pre-med. Breaks my parents' hearts because I was like, you know what? I graduated with my good GPA and I said, I can't do this. I don't want to go to medical school. I was out for a year. Then I went to graduate school in TV production and I got video skills, which have served me well. I went away from them and I came back, and then just lately, the fact that I have video skills has, since the pandemic, it's been very useful to me. I've been very fortunate. But what happened is I was in graduate school and there was a funniest person in Austin contest, and I decided to try it. And in the prelims, I did really well and I made it to the finals. And in the finals, I choked, but I was hooked. And yeah, so quite a long time ago now. Okay, so I want to leave you with two things. One is a series of jokes, and here's how they came to be. One of the bits of my bio that Constance mentioned is that I performed at the Marion Koshland Science Museum, and it's an outlet of the National Academy of Sciences. And the first time I was there, I had a great show. Use your imagination. I was funny that day. And they asked me if I would come back the next year, but here's something comics love to hear. Could you come back with a whole new act themed to go with our new exhibit on infectious disease? Okay. And this is 10 years ago or more. I have no idea, actually. I have no ability to place things in time. It was quite a long time ago. And I said yes because I wanted the gig. And then I was like, what did I just commit to? And so in putting together an act that was themed on infectious disease, I ended up coming up with a couple bar jokes. So this is like a standard structure for a joke, but all the actual jokes. So the structure, of course, you've heard, but these jokes are all original to me. And if you have heard some of these, I've had them online for quite a long time, 8 or 10 years. So it started with me thinking about viruses, interestingly enough. And the fact that viruses are not even quite a life form because they can't reproduce on their own. They have to get inside a cell to reproduce. But once they get inside your cells, they take over the machinery and turn it to their uses. So it's kind of like a hostile takeover, like your cells under new management. And if you think about this stuff too hard, here's the kind of jokes you write. A virus walks into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve viruses in this bar. The virus replaces the bartender and says, now we do. An infectious disease walks into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve infectious diseases in this bar. The infectious disease says, well, you're not a very good host. Groaning is acceptable. Two bacteria walk into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve bacteria in this bar. The bacteria say, but we work here. We're staff. A room temperature superconductor walks into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve any superconductors in this bar. The room temperature superconductor leaves without putting up any resistance. A neutrino walks into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve neutrinos in this bar. The neutrino says, hey, I was just passing through. That joke is sound. An infrared photon walks into a bar and says, is it hot in here or is it just me? 10,000 electrons walk into a bar. The bartender was shocked. A radio wave walks into a bar. The bartender says, can I get you anything? The radio wave says, no, I'm just here for the reception. A statistician walks into just your average bar. The bartender says, we don't serve statisticians in this bar. The statistician says, well, you're just mean. The Higgs boson walks into a church in Geneva. The bartender, the priest says, we don't allow your kind here. The Higgs boson says, but without me, how can you have mass? Schrodinger's cat walks into a bar and doesn't. And finally, gratefully, some helium gas drifts into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve noble gases in this bar. The helium doesn't react. Okay, so I want to leave you, I quoted Isaac Asimov earlier. I want to leave you with a quotation from another Isaac Newton, who once said, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And isn't that a beautiful and amazing thing to hear? I mean, it's astonishing to think that Isaac Newton, inventor of gravity, universally hailed as perhaps the greatest scientific mind to ever walk the earth, believed in giants? It's shocking. No, but seriously, what I like about that quotation is what it says about science. That science, well, it's a process. It's not a collection of facts gathered in dusty books on the shelves of a library. It's a process, a human, collaborative, living process. And it's kind of like a relay race. Every generation carries the baton as far as they can, and then they hand it off to the next generation, and they carry it as far as they can. And this is happening in myriad directions at the same time. And scientists are not the kind of people to take because I said so as an answer to anything. And really, when you think about it, sometime in the distant past, we became conscious of the fact that we were here on this apparently flat earth with this giant ball of brilliant light in the daytime and little points of light at night orbiting us. Like, what could be more obvious than that? But through years of careful plotting, detective work, scientists have pieced together a picture of a universe that is so different from that. It's a 13.7 billion year evolving universe and 4.5 billion year evolving Earth. That it's a globe and we're the ones going around the sun. And, you know, of all the things we celebrate in our culture, you know, what do we celebrate the most these days? It seems like movie stars and rock stars and sports stars and reality TV stars. Well, what about the stars? And what about reality? We don't celebrate them nearly enough. And even the ways that we do celebrate those other things totally depend on science and engineering. We wouldn't have satellite links and instant replays and stadiums that can hold 100,000 people and you know, mini computers that can sit in your hand and wirelessly show you cat videos. I'm not saying we put it all to great use, but all of these things and those shows that celebrate the movie stars, we wouldn't even be able to have those if it wasn't for the science and the technology that makes all of that possible. So this is really all to say that thank you to everyone at SURF and to everyone that just attended Neutrino Day. It really is an honor to be here with you in this virtual space, talking about and celebrating science. And to the scientists, thank you, and keep doing it. You're pushing forward the frontiers of human knowledge. What's cooler than that? And for everyone else, we get to just learn about it from them. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for laughing if you did. And let's bring Constance on and talk a little. But this has been a blast for me. So this was my first Neutrino Day.
Oh, Brian, this
Yes.
was fantastic.
Thank you. I
gotta
can't tell.
We were all over here laughing like crazy. This, and you said so many things that.
I said a lot of things.
You said so many things that we hear a lot. You know, we talk about. You were talking about star stuff, and
Yeah.
You know, we have this small accelerator underground, and that you talked about that, Caspar. They are trying to learn more about the elements inside of stars and how all of that helped form life on Earth and all these different elements. And, you know, we also have a strong connection to the native culture of the Black Hills.
Yes.
And we were putting together this cultural awareness video, Matt Kappist, who's engineering all the sound and everything else for us behind the scenes.
Matt.
Good job, yes. And so as we were talking with Jace DeCory, who has been with Black Hill State University for many years, Jace said, yeah, we are all star stuff. And Native Americans have known that for centuries because their origin story says they came from the stars.
Really?
Yeah, and so and that's almost universal through different Native American cultures. There's always that element of,
That's
of the
wonderful.
stars. So it was interesting to have that perspective.
You know what? I often say that the hippies and the new age people had it right, because we really are all one. We are all made from the exact same stuff.
Right.
And it traces, you know what I like to say too sometimes is that, okay, so most of these atoms were forged in the core of a star. Some maybe during a supernova. Others might have actually been forged by neutron star collisions. And so all of those, except for the hydrogen, perhaps some of this hydrogen, instead of just being a few billion years old, is some of that hydrogen traces back. Its origin is really from the Big Bang. So it's even older. So like you trace your existence all the way back to the ashes of the Big Bang and the energy that entered the universe with the Big Bang. Everything is made of it. So we really are all one thing. It's true.
Yeah. Well, this has just been, we did laugh a lot. I have to tell you, we were laughing a lot. And
I hope so.
As a mom,
I hope you were laughing at the right parts.
I was, and especially as a mom myself and now a grandmother, I say, because I told you so, a lot. And I have had children, my children have been so curious. They've always said, why this, why? You know, when kids are little, it's why?
Yeah.
And finally, sometimes you can only resort to because I said so. Because
I know.
That's because they won't stop.
Yeah.
You know?
But they're little scientists.
Right.
You know, there's something that I haven't developed where I want to say, like, you know, they're scientists already. The first person who ducked when something was thrown at them was a scientist. You know, like they learned from past experiences.
Right. That's a good way to think about that. But yes, you know, it's one of the things that we try to do at SURF too is, you know, get kids to think about the world in which they live in a whole different way. Not to just, you talked about books on shelves with all these dusty old facts and things like that. Well, certainly we need those basic fundamental building blocks of learning. We need to know where to start, but we also can't just say, wow, this is the way it is. So what we try to do here with this magnificent education and outreach team we have, and you've seen them in action this week, they're trying to make kids think about that differently. So really, I think they're to blame for the way some of these kids harass their parents and don't accept the finale. They don't accept that final because I told you so. There's a great story that one of our education specialists told me once about working with kids at an elementary school. These were kindergartners. And they were doing a project or a curriculum unit called Evidence of Creature Feature, it was called. So what they were doing was looking for evidence of animals, of creatures out in the world. And these kids were looking at poop, of course. They found a lot of that because we have a lot of deer in the Black Hills. And so you find deer pellets everywhere. And then one of the kids the next day came back to school with a stick that looked like it just might be a deer antler, and thought that showed that there was evidence of deer having been in that area. And it was fascinating because, yes, it was a stick, but this child was seeing the world in a different way and looking at it in a whole new, from a whole different perspective. And I thought that was just marvelous.
That's
just
great.
One of my favorite stories to tell about the way kids learn. So,
you know, one other thing about perspective, and tied into something that I learned about the Sanford lab, underground there, and I learned this at Snow Lab as well, that you'd think it's just this big physics lab, but there's some biology experiments going on there. And there at SURF, one of the things that you've told me that you're looking at are some extremophiles.
Yes.
And that's why when I said that almost all life is powered by the sun, well, some life deep underground isn't powered by sunlight, but it's heat from the earth and maybe radiation and whatever else. But those extremophiles that we call, and you know, we call these things at the ocean bottom by these hot sulfur vents. We call them extremophiles. But though, let's forget the ones in your cavern for a minute, and the ones at the bottom of the ocean. That might be where life evolved. In the ocean, for sure.
Right.
And then crawled out onto land. It's like, they're not the extremophiles. We are the extremophiles. Yeah. We're the ones who went and conquered some crazy, outrageously different environment, nothing like the womb where life originated. Right. We're the extremophiles.
Right. But we have always put ourselves at the center of the universe, as you know. And so,
of course.
But we've got these, it's interesting to think about these different life forms because we need oxygen. You were talking about trees needing carbon dioxide, and we need oxygen. But some of these extremophiles that live deep underground in these different environments, they're living inside of rock. So they're not even getting oxygen. So how are they breathing? What are they eating? How do they survive? And what happens to them once you take them out of that environment? So there's so much we can learn from these life forms. In fact, we had a group of scientists here who are studying those creatures with the idea of learning more about potential life on Mars. So there is, in 2021, they're sending the next rover up, and there's going to be a laser called Sherlock on that, attached to that. And I can't really think, I don't know what all the Sherlock stands for, but of course it's all about looking for, trying to discover life on Mars. And that laser, that Sherlock device was prototyped in part at the Sanford Underground Research Facility.
Oh, that's so cool.
So we have a connection to Mars now too. I'm very excited.
Yeah, the last gig I actually got to do before all my personal appearances were canceled was at Los Alamos National Lab. And so you know that there's a spacecraft with a laser on Mars right now.
Yes.
And I got to interview a woman, Nina Lanza, who operates that laser, and it zaps rocks. But what they're sending in 2021 is the new, improved, better one.
Yes.
The follow-up.
Right.
But that's super cool. And I love that you brought that up, because sometimes when we think about what kind of alien life might exist in the universe, first of all, just ponder for a second the incredible variety of life that's just here on Earth, all related to each other.
Yes.
Like how can you imagine how different things could be when things are as different as that extremophile or a platypus, or, things are so different right here. How different could they be when we expand to things not even related to us?
Right. It's fascinating. It's a magnificent world we live in, and there's just so much that we can learn right here on Earth. And it's just fascinating to me, all of the different things that are happening right here at SURF. And we partner with people with Snow Lab. We partner with Fermilab and Los Alamos. We have scientists from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Oak Ridge in Tennessee. We've got Pacific Northwest. I mean, we work with laboratories, national laboratories all over this country.
Yeah.
And we're also starting to do some work with international laboratories. We're partnering with CERN. For the first time in CERN's history, they're funding something outside of the European Union, and that is the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment. So, Dune, yes. So what a great, it's just, we're all learning from each other, and it's just fascinating.
That's amazing. I've been to CERN once, and I've been to Fermilab once. So like Fermilab to Snow Lab, and I still have to come to LEED and to surf, but I'm like on a little tour of neutrino labs.
Yes, and Brian, that brings me back to this, because I want to once again say that I really, really appreciate everything you've done for us this week. My gosh, you've been on. We contracted with you for really 1.5 days, and one talk, and you've done 4 science talks that were absolutely brilliant. You did a wonderful promotional video for us that we still enjoy watching.
Thanks.
You did this fantastic program today, and you never lost your energy. It was kind of a relief to me to hear you sort of get lost there, because that happens to me all the time. all the time. It's crazy, but you have just been doing some magnificent things for us. Now,
Thanks.
I have to tell you, we do have we have some special gifts for you, Brian. Now, I've kept this kind of secret from you all week. Oh, my assistant is bringing it to me right now.
Okay.
Am I going to be able to show it to him? Okay. So, you know, Brian, our theme this year was a matter mystery. So, we have this fabulous shirt for you.
Oh, I don't see you.
Oh, Brian's not seeing me. So,
But
anyway,
I see that other shot.
let's see. Can we hold Brian up on the other? Let's see. Are you moving, Brian? Do you see yourself moving around? And
No, all I see is that. There we go. There's Aaron. And
team, our SDSTA team, our partners, and so much thanks to our speakers and the Neutrino Day Planning Committee. And finally, I need to thank my team, Matt Kappist, Aaron Broberg, Nick Hubbard, and Cody Klein, who have made this week really enjoyable and just made it successful. So thanks to my team, thanks to everybody who made Neutrino Day possible, and thank you again, Brian, for just being here with us all
Thank you.
week.